I showed up for my fellowship at Penn. It was at 10 Penn Tower at the time. You guys were there. I think you guys moved since then. But I show up and I showed up like 30 minutes early or something. And I was just trying to scope out the scene and know where to go. And then I
Mhm.
was going to go somewhere else and hang out and come back. But I go up and it was glass. So Gallagher saw me through the glass and she's like, "Oh, come on in." I was like, "Shit, I'm 30 minutes early." And so she sits me down in the room 30 minutes early, or maybe even 45 minutes early. She sits me down. I'm sitting there, and then walks Joe Cerletti like 20 minutes. He was early too. He was like 20 minutes early, and he goes,
Welcome to the DIEP End. Today, we're joined by Dr. Luis Macias, board-certified plastic surgeon in Los Angeles, faculty for the Aesthetic Surgery Fellowship of Los Angeles, and the Aesthetic Program Director at USC in the Division of Plastic and Reconstructive Surgery. Before medicine, he served in the United States Marine Corps as an avionics technician working on Hornet fighter jets. Dr. Macias went on to complete plastic and reconstructive surgery residency at the Mayo Clinic, followed by microsurgery fellowship at the University of Pennsylvania, before returning to Los Angeles to complete the USC Marina Aesthetic Surgery Fellowship under Dr. Grant Stevens. In this episode, we dive into his journey from military service to plastic surgery, the transition from reconstruction to aesthetics, and how his journey across microsurgery and aesthetic surgery shaped the surgeon he is today. We also discuss aesthetic fellowships, innovation in aesthetic surgery, mentorship, and the art of developing an aesthetic eye in modern day plastic surgery. Let's dive in. Thank you for taking the time. I know you're so busy, but I think the best place to start and where we normally start is from the beginning. And for you, you have a super unique past. I know you were a Marine before going into medicine. So tell us a little bit about that.
"It seems like a lifetime ago almost, because it has been a few years now." um, I I always wanted to be a fighter pilot, and so that's what I thought I was going to do. But then my senior year in high school, I'm driving and I couldn't see which lane a car was in, and I was like, "No, I needed these. Once you need these, you can't be a pilot in the military."
Really? Realize that.
Yeah, you can't have corrected vision to go into it. Once you are in it and you need corrective vision, then it's fine. And
Really?
LASIK was just a new thing at the time. So it was, it was a new procedure. I didn't know if I was going to get LASIK, if they would know. I just didn't bother down that route. And it was like 10 grand an eye. And that was a lot of money back then, and it was kind of experimental. So I didn't do it. And I ended up just joining the military, joining the Marine Corps. Is a funny story because I went to go talk to all of them. And I went to the Air Force, I went to the Army, I went to the Navy, to the Coast Guard. And I said, how much for college? Because I kind of knew I wanted to go to college and do something with my life. I didn't exactly know what it was going to do, but I was like, "What do you give me for college? What do you give me for college?" I go to the Marine Corps guy. I'll never forget his name, Sergeant Green. And he goes, "What's the matter? I don't want to give you for college. You come back and talk to me when you want to be a Marine." And I walked out. I'm like, I've never joined the Marine Corps. Next day, I'm in his office. "Sergeant Green, I want to be a Marine." There, I think I know I joined the Marine Corps because I wanted the discipline. I had the longest boot camp, and they gave me something I could work with the F-18 Hornets that I didn't have that ability with some of the other forces. They wouldn't sort of give me a specialty, and this one sort of gave me something I could work near airplanes because I always had a passion for airplanes and I wanted to be near that. So yeah, and the uniform's the best, honestly. The dress blues are the most, like, wearing that uniform, it was just something else. Like, you don't get that kind of sense of pride and joy wearing too many things. Like, even the white coat ceremony felt special, but it honestly didn't feel like when I first put on my dress blues. Just they do great marketing, so maybe I got into some of that marketing, you know what I mean? Few the proud, but the uniform is something, and I learned quite a bit, and I think I still use a lot of it in my current day-to-day life.
I'm sure you built a lot of military habits. What are some of those habits you still have in your day to day life?
One of them is not to be late, so I like to be 10 to 15 minutes early to everything, much to my wife's chagrin. Because she thinks it's a waste of time, but I hate being rushed and being
Yeah.
late to things. I used to be a morning person. I still am somewhat, but I used to be even more of a morning person. But college kind of knocked that out of me a little bit. In college, I was a little bit of a crammer, so I'd stay up late studying, and
Yeah.
so that knocked that out a little bit. But yeah, I'd say that timeliness is definitely something that. Oh, and I use a military clock on my phone all the time. And 1711 is the time. That is a very important thing to do. So you never set your alarm clock at the wrong time.
But how did your path lend back to medicine?
Yeah. So when I was in the Marines, I was an avionics technician, right? So while I was there, I was like, okay, I like this, but I was on the hardware side of things. I was fixing like computer boards on a weapon defense system on the F-18. So I was changing out, well, I technically didn't change out the capacitors. I figured out what was wrong on the motherboards and then sent it to some other guy who actually physically changed out the capacitors. So I was a diagnostic guy on a big computer thing. And I saw that at the time. I thought the money wasn't in the hardware, or the future wasn't in the hardware. And you're a young guy trying to decide what you can do with your life. And you're like, then it looks like it's in software, and I don't really like the software stuff. And this isn't me. I don't like just doing this. I like other things. I like using my hands, and I didn't changing just hardware. So I just somehow the computer, and I knew it was coming. This is the early 90s. I knew the computer wave was coming, but I didn't think it was for me. So I needed to go figure something out. So I thought, I always wanted to go to college. I was asking the recruiters what I needed for school. So I applied to college. I applied to UCLA as undecided and went to UCLA to figure it out.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
So obviously you went into medicine, but then what sparked your interest in surgery or, plastic surgery? I think there's a common theme. We've had a bunch of surgeons on here say that they either like to fly planes, and the other one we always get is cardiothoracic surgery. And then they
Yeah,
went
and I got
plastic
those
surgery.
both, and it's kind of crazy
Yeah.
because when I was in my rotations, I want to be a CT surgery, but all their surgeries are getting stolen. So I'm like, that doesn't seem too great. And if I would have matched plastics, that was going to be my fallback. I would enjoy it, but I
Yeah.
do fly planes now, and I love aviation, and yeah, is funny that there's a common theme. I hear that often.
Yeah, Cheryl Aston was talking about being a cardiac surgeon, and then Randy Sherman. I don't know if you
Yeah,
know him.
yes, he was my flight surgeon. I knew him well. Yeah, rest in peace.
Yeah,
Wow.
crazy. But you talked a little bit about how the military background influenced being on time.
I got a good story about being on time.
Okay. Yeah. Let's hear it.
I showed up for my fellowship at Penn. It was at 10 Penn Tower at the time. You guys were there. I think you guys moved since then. But I show up and I showed up like 30 minutes early or something. And I was just trying to scope out the scene and know where to go. And then I was going to go somewhere else and hang out and come back. But I go up and it was glass. So Gallagher saw me through the glass and she's like, "Oh, come on in." I was like, "Shit, I'm 30 minutes early." And so she sits me down in the room 30 minutes early, or maybe even 45 minutes early. She sits me down. I'm sitting there, and then walks Joe Cerletti like 20 minutes. He was early too. He was like 20 minutes early, and he goes, "Oh, you made it." And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm here." So I'm sitting there
That's so
twiddling my
funny.
thumbs like for 20 minutes, and I'm the only guy there because I do like to be on time. So that was an awkward moment for me, but I don't know if it helped land me the
It made
fellowship or
an
not. But
impression for sure.
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Especially with Chris. I think if
Yeah.
Chris anything to tell you right now, it'd be go back and log your cases. She's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, I actually I have a little logbook with all my cases still. So I don't think we had to log them for our fellowship though, because ours was the first year there was a match. Micro match my year was the first year. So, it's not AC Jimmy, so we don't have to log any. We didn't have to log anything back then.
yeah. So this is the beauty of the podcast is like we can kind of like move all around and
Yeah.
the conversation goes. And now that you brought up Penn Tower and Chris and Cerletti, what got you thinking about doing a microsurgery fellowship and coming to Penn for that? And then how was your overall experience?
I mean, it was one of the best years of my life. I really enjoyed my year there. It was fantastic. I learned so much from everyone there. Joe,
Something.
Cerletti, Lisa Wu. I mean, all the faculty that were there. I mean, Suhail Kunchwala was amazing. Kovac was phenomenal. I mean, I spent so many days, nights, and with Kovac doing some really awesome, interesting cases. And
He's still the same.
I was gonna say it's the same.
and he
Yeah.
there was a day that there was a complication that was my fault. We were pretty well into the fellowship, and I was doing okay. And I raised a gracilis on the minor pedicle. And he walks in and he goes, "Is that on the minor pedicle?" And I look and I'm like, "Yeah." And he goes, put in the bucket, harvest the other. So I put in the bucket, harvest the other. I'm like in my head thinking, well, at least now she's got bilateral inner thigh lifts and she's gonna look better. This is
Yeah.
better for her.
Already thinking aesthetics. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like, this is gonna be better for her. But of course,
Yeah.
I'm beating myself up because I thought I was a decent fellow, and I raised a flap on a freaking minor pedicle, and she spent more time in the OR, and I felt terrible. And he could see I was kind of down and out about it. As I'm walking out, he goes, Luis, do you drink whiskey? I said, no, I don't drink whiskey. He goes, tonight is for whiskey.
That's amazing.
And I said, okay. So you know what? I love whiskey now. I am a Scotch guy. Thank you, Penn.
That's amazing.
Thank you,
I love
Dr. Kovac. It is my favorite drink, and it was that night that introduced me. I went to Village Whiskey. I used to go to Village Whiskey all the time and get their burger that was their Village Burger or whatever, or their whiskey burger or something, and it was amazing. But I never got this. I never got the whiskey. So that night was the first, and it was him who got me started.
We're gonna have to bring that up because we've been meaning to get him on, and he wants to be on so badly too. But he's so busy, as you know, always in the OR.
Yeah, I know. You're gonna have to do it while he's operating, but that might lead to some
we're
bigger
gonna bring that
problems.
up for sure, though. The obvious next question is, you did a micro fellowship, and then not too many people after that then decide to pivot into aesthetics. But the person that comes to mind, but in the reverse, is Tyler Safran, who
Yes.
we love at Penn. But he
Awesome.
kind of
Yeah.
did it in the reverse order. Tell us about that and how that started.
Yeah, so he and I share the distinction of doing the same fellowship, the only two.
Yeah.
But what's funny is there was another guy at the same time that was doing a similar thing, and
Was it Jason Rusturian?
correct. So Jason
Yeah.
Rustein, a friend of mine, he's actually a year, I think, behind me, but he was doing the same thing. And I'm from LA. I went to UCLA. He was doing residency at UCLA. And so I was trying to sort of figure out what I'm gonna do with my life and get a job in LA. And I didn't want to leave LA. And he already had the UCLA job, in the pocket because he came from there and he was going to do these fellowships, similar to Tyler having his job back when he went back to Montreal. I was talking at USC, but USC didn't want someone straight out of fellowship. They had just hired Joe Carey the year before from Stanford, and then he didn't want another fresh out of training guy. They had just bought an OR, and I said, hey, we could set up an aesthetic center for you. It was Henry Kawamoto's OR with the president of ASPS, McGuire. So it was McGuire and Kawamoto's office. And I was like, I could set that up. We could do USC aesthetic surgery, and then I'll do halftime the county hospital because I really wanted to work at a county hospital and do flap reconstruction. But he was looking for famous people to bring the program, more research and obviously bring the program up. And he didn't want to hire me, so I couldn't leave LA. Irvine was too far for me. I didn't even bother looking at Irvine. So basically, it was UCLA or USC for me. And then at that point, I was like, okay. I started looking elsewhere. I started looking at like Mayo. At that point, Ohio State was doing this really cool thing where they were bringing together, and they still have it, but they were bringing together derms, ENTs, plastics, and that was really exciting to me. And I was willing to go anywhere in the country. But during my fellowship, so I did the Penn Fellowship first, and then the aesthetic fellowship here, the one that I'm currently, faculty with. At the time, it was just with Grant Stevens, and Michelle Spring was the other person with Grant Stevens. My father passed away while I was in the fellowship. And at that point, I couldn't leave LA. So that just basically left UCLA and USC for me. And when that wasn't working out, I was going to set up a shingle. And Grant then asked me if I wanted to stay with him. And it was, at the time, a very easy transition for me with family stuff. I said, sure. And I did a few free flaps here and there afterwards, some breast stuff. But, obviously the aesthetic practice is one that in LA, you kind of have to be all in on. And did my last free flap in 2018.
Wow.
Not long ago.
Not that long ago, yeah. And it's funny to stop doing a lot of the breast stuff, but I was taking call at a hospital just because I like to take call. So I was taking call and I would get a lot of extremity injuries.
Wow.
And it was Kovac's work that I was using the most of. So back to Kovac. So I was doing a lot of extremity recon. Thanks, Dr.
That's
Kovac,
awesome.
once again. So that my last free flap was actually an ALT to an extremity.
Wow.
But it's hard to say no when somebody like Grant Stevens is asking you to, join their practice. And that must say you're very humble, obviously, but it must say a lot about you. Why do you think, he asked you?
And I to piggyback off of that, I
Yeah.
agree. I wonder what his viewpoint was, because here's a guy who just did a microsurgery fellowship and kind of has that microsurgery aspect to it, but then he's hiring that person for an aesthetic position. So I'm curious about that viewpoint too.
At that time, Grant had Michelle Spring as his associate, and he was busy. He did a lot of marketing, obviously, and his brand, rhinoplastic surgery, was big, and he had a lot of patient flow. So he had patients to spare, and he needed someone to help him with those. And I think he saw I could do good surgery when I was his fellow, with the fellow cases that I did, and I think also I speak Spanish, so I think that was a little bit of a draw to see if he could market to the Latino population and get some Spanish speaking people, because we do make up the majority of the population in Los Angeles County. So I think that was part of it. I was one of the first fellows that was from Los Angeles for him to. I was the first person from LA that he ever had a fellowship in his fellowship. So I don't know if he was thinking about it from the get go, honestly. And yeah, now there would. After I came, there was a couple other fellows he hired, and basically had Dan Gould and then Justin Perez. Another guy named Ziad Hamuda was there shortly. So there's like four of us that he hired straight out of fellowship. And, I think he saw I needed to stay in town, and he gave me an opportunity, and I was very thankful to him for that. And I learned so much at his office. I was there for 5 years. It wasn't a short time. I was there for a long time, and I never made partners, and it was time for me to do my own thing. So I built my own practice.
Do you think that if you had made partners, things might have been different?
Oh yeah, I would have stayed. I really enjoyed it. Honestly, I wish it could be. There was a guy there that when I interviewed for the fellowship, his name's Dave Stoker, who's across the street, who's an amazing surgeon. I wish it were Dave Stoker, Dan Gould, Justin Perez, and me. The four of us would be killing it, and it'd be amazing. And we'd be like a, marina powerhouse. But, it's hard for people to make business work sometimes. I see it all the time. There's few relationships that last a very long
Yeah.
time. Finances get in the way of a lot of things, unfortunately. So I was just an employee at first, and then I became an independent contractor, so it wasn't too messy in my case, thank God. And
Mm-hmm.
one of my program directors in plastic surgery, he gave me advice. He said, there are two relationships that you can't mess up because they're both equally as painful and equally as expensive to break up in. That's your marriage and then who you marry in business. So who you marry as a business partner, because yeah, that breakup is painful and expensive. That's why it's been slow. I've been slow to hire an associate because I'm trying to find one that's going to be a partner and a great partner for the rest of my career. And hopefully this practice continues to grow with them, because that breakup is painful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess what can you tell people who are looking at positions like this where there's the whole individual practice in a silo and then group practices and then being in a group practice and not having the potential for partnership? Can you comment on any of those?
Yeah, I mean, things are changing right now, especially with, all the money that's coming from private equity and stuff. So things are changing drastically. I mean, when I was in your guys' position, the idea of private practice was something that was very attainable. People just go out and set up shingles. They give us loans for it, like you could just do it. It's becoming harder and harder and harder. I mean, like the hospitals don't let you have privileges if you're not from their system. The competition is more difficult because the private equity groups are making buying purchasing power of things and scale of economy of their marketing and their way of handling leads and things like that just make it
Yeah.
hard for us to all duplicate or triplicate, or if there's 100 practices in a building, you've got 100 different people trying to do the same little system. And if you could just take one system and put 100 surgeons into it, then you're able to make more money and offer a cheaper service and then get more patients. So I think it's hard, and you have to look at what you need, what you want. Some people are okay with being an employee, and that's amazing. Some people want a little more responsibility or flexibility, because if you're your employee, you're not going to get to go to the aesthetic cruise every 2 years for a month, and you're not going to go to all the conferences. It's going to be hard to be involved with the aesthetic society if you're like always traveling for things and you have to ask for permission and all this kind of stuff. that stuff gets more difficult if you're not in charge.
Mm-hmm.
And then also being in California or even LA, where it's one of the most competitive markets
Yeah.
for aesthetic plastic surgery, how do you, establish yourself? Do you have to be known as like a specific surgery you're doing? Is it harder to be like full body, or is it just marketing, or how do you compete with private equity and then also just sheer number of plastic surgeons?
Yeah, it's tough. I was fortunate that I had a large volume of patients that through the 5 years that I was at Grant's
Yeah.
practice, there was just a certain volume of people that knew my name. So that was helpful when I first started my practice. And the before and afters that you can have a gallery that people look at. But that being said,
Yeah.
that was mostly in body, right? So
Yeah.
to transition to mostly faces, that was a slow transition in that my body patients started aging with me. I'm in my 50s. So as my patients were getting in their 40s and asking for facelifts, they're like, hey, will you do my facelift? And then one facelift turned to another, and then another facelift turned to another. And then like I'm looking at my results and I'm like, I think I can do better. And then chasing that better result is what led me to, seek out mentors in facelift and go visit people like Ben and Francisco Bravo and try to
Yeah.
improve my results and get better and better, which basically made me obsessed about how I can get the best possible facelift results. And I'm not there. I think even those guys will tell you they're not there because we're all trying to get even better and better every day, right? So I think it's that obsession and passion for getting better that people see. And then, you try to translate that to your social media,
Yeah.
your webpage, just, footprint out there. And then it comes back. I think people see, like, I even get people now that come and say, I want you to do my facelift. Can you do my breast dog? Do you still do body? And I'm like, yeah, I'm a plastic surgeon. I do body, and
We
look
do
at all the stuff
everything.
I used to do. Like, I look at my
Like your
whole,
neck
like, I don't
surgery.
forget how to
I
do
was
a,
gonna say I could put a gracilis on your face if you want me
yeah.
to.
Well, I might raise it on the minor pedicle, so maybe not that one. But like, yeah, I still do that. But I think in LA, you do have to. People are savvy. What led me to doing deep network too was patients are asking for it, right? Like, and I'm
Yeah.
seeing it in my results, and like people in LA know. So you have to, if you're going to be facelift surgeon, you have to know those techniques. You may not want to use them at all. There's great surgeons who never take out glands, who never do deep network, and they have fantastic facelift results and fantastic like facelift practices. And they're never going to take out a gland, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But in my market and the way I wanted to improve my results, I would look at a result and I'm like, oh, I can see that gland, and it would bother me. And then, again, people come asking and they want that really chiseled neck. And I'm like, yeah, I could do that for you. So I went down
Yeah.
that learning curve years ago.
No, I was gonna say, like, you talked about so much right there that we could do a whole podcast on some of this. Like your transitions to private practice, and then your transitions in your clinical work. These initial 5 years. Was there ever a moment where you're like, "Crap, what did I just do? Like, I hope this is the right decision." Like, were you ever like second guessing it those first few years, or were you like the
I
whole
will
time?
tell you when.
Yeah,
It was March 16th, 2020.
yeah.
That's the day I was like, oh man, I might have made a mistake. Because what had happened was I started my own practice in 2019, and it took basically a year to open up my office. And I was really low overhead, super low overhead, using a space 2 days a week, just enough to cover small bills. It was really nice. And then January of 2020, I get my certificate of occupancy for my really amazing over the top office that I spent way too much on. And I spent 100 and something $1,000 in furniture in December 30 something to make sure I made it through the tax year. And then I'm in my office for, a couple months, and the reports of closures were coming from Europe and my friends in Europe. And I was like, oh my God, we're going to close. We're going to close. We're going
Gosh.
to close. And then we're closing in March. So that's when I was like, oh, we might not make it through this. And nobody, not even Grant, who's an amazing mind in marketing and like knowing how the market's going to go and what's going to happen, nobody saw what was going to come when we opened back up and that it was going to be a boom. So at that
Wow.
point, I'm like, that's it. I don't have that much cash on hand. I kind of put it all into the office. We're going to run dry. And the PPP was for people who had employees, but I only had 3 employees because I was super lean the year before, and it was based on the year before. And I just hired a whole bunch of people because I had opened up my big
Yeah.
office. it was pretty bad. And what's funny is that was when I put up a billboard. I was like, nobody knows I have my own practice and nobody knows. I'm like, here's my last 50K. I'm going all in. And I put a billboard on the 90, $50,000, nothing else left. I go, it's up there. People are riding their bikes and they'll see it. And then when stuff opens up, maybe they'll come see me. Well, nobody was spending anything on marketing during that time because they didn't know what was going and everyone was trying to hold on to cash. So my
Yeah.
billboard was one of the only billboards in town for like 6 months and I never paid another dollar for it. They left it up for
That's
5 more
genius.
months
That
for
ended up
free.
being genius.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was just sure luck and like
It's still
I'm all in and it's either
Yeah.
it's either this works or I'm done.
But it's a good lesson for residents that are listening. But in general, we don't have formal training in running a business or finance stuff. And if you're going into staying at an academic center, it's completely different than trying to run your own business, hire people, buy furniture, advertise for yourself. It's complicated and it's stressful. It's adds a whole nother layer to, just doing surgery. But something else, yeah.
That's the last billboard I ever had, first and last. I've never had another one, and I didn't look like a traditional billboard. It just kind of looked like I won Best of the West Side, so I put it up like the magazine put it up, and everyone thought the magazine had put it up,
I
and
like
not
that.
that I put it up. It was really low key, but it worked. It got me a lot of business.
I love that.
I should put some up again.
Yeah, I think you should. It worked out. But so you consider yourself, you said it a couple of times now on the podcast, a facelift surgeon. But I'm curious what your practice, not the exact numbers, but like, is there still a lot of rhinoplasty, blephs? How much? But I know you might have specific patients that have been coming to you for years and they're like, please, can you do my breasts as well? And you do them. But how do you normally book your,
Yeah, at this
days in
point,
your
it's
schedule?
60% facelift.
Hmm.
The other 40% is some body and rhinoplasty. I still do
Yeah.
rhinoplasty. I do structural rhinoplasty. I thought about getting into the preservation stuff, but because my practice has
yes.
been just going more and more face, that learning curve, I don't think I'm going to go into. And if I were going to be like a rhinoplasty guy, I'd be doing more of
Yeah.
like preservation, learning preservation. I'd go visit like Dino and I'd go visit Aaron Cousins, obviously, or Jason, my friend who does a bit of preservation as well. But I just not a curve that I want to get into as my rhinoplasty practice has started to become less and less. I'm a Rhinoplasty Society member. I used to do 50 a year at one point, but I'm not doing that many anymore
Yeah.
as the facelifts are taking, they take me a little bit more time. And so I'll do a facelift a day and that's a whole OR day for me. And as opposed to body cases, I'll do 2, 3, 4 in a day sometimes. Right. So nowadays aren't just like a facelift anymore, right?
Yes.
Complete rejuvenation. So it's brow, bleph, sometimes the lower eyelids, fat grafting, lip lift, obviously the a deplane facelift, extend deplane with the crevasse technique. And so there's more to it, Yeah.
Yeah. And also, you were saying, obviously, in LA, plastic surgery is so prevalent that your patients are coming in very well educated or they've done their research when they come into your office. So it's probably more so than other places in the country. But especially with social media and filters and expectations, when a patient comes in to meet you for the first time and they're sitting across from you, how do you meet them at their level and manage their expectations, especially with all these evolving new techniques, buzzwords, and stuff that you're comfortable with or things that are going to be newer to you because as everything evolves, how do you manage success in that way?
I mean, it's really tough because a lot of times people come in and they think they know things and this or that. And how's your technique different? They'll come in with
Yeah.
very specific things like, how does it differ to this, to that, to this, to that? And they're like,
Yeah.
what exactly do you do the modified sailboat, or do you do the crevasse, or how do you do it exactly
Yeah.
like Nyack does? Do you do it like, and they're asking me for like exact technical differences. And I'm just like, in the end, it's not like the technique. It's about the technician, right? You have to understand their aesthetic eye and trust that they're going to do the best thing for you. And you're not picking a surgery, you're picking a surgeon. And that is what I tell my patients. I'm like, look, you just have to either have known that you had know someone that had a great experience with me and trust that I'm going to give you that what you're looking for. And, I try to mimic what we're going to get in the surgery, but most of the time it's a referral from someone they saw that had a good result and they're going to come see me and expect a very similar result. Those are easier than the random who walks in off sort of Instagram, then I do get, and they're like asking weird questions and chat GPT
Yeah.
stuff. And you're just like, okay, well, if I'm not the person you want, then you should go see who you want.
Yeah.
Or any recent people who are just still have your billboard in their memory. They're like, I'm still,
Yeah, no, that billboard was a long time ago. That was COVID. So that's like 6 years ago. That it stayed up for 6 months, but it's been a while.
that's amazing. What a cool story. And then correct me if I'm wrong on your title, but you're the program director for aesthetics now at USC. Is that correct?
At USC, yeah. So I'm in charge of the aesthetic curriculum for the residents there. There's the blocks of aesthetics is one of the big 4 blocks. And so I'm in charge of the curriculum and the site director, essentially. You guys are familiar with all these terms. So I'm the
Yeah.
site
Yes.
director for the aesthetic side.
Yeah.
And so we have the resident clinic here, the chief residents.
That's
As a matter of
awesome.
fact, where are they at? They're right there. There's all the residents at USC. So,
I love that. Yeah.
so I have them on my wall here. Yeah. So they spend 3 months out of their chief year here, along with other attendings. I'm not the only one. There's other attendings, obviously, but it's like me, Jay Calvert, Linda Lee are sort of the main attendings on that side. And it mimics a lot our fellowship. They go visit the people of their fellowship because also Jay Calvert, Ash Gavami, Riti Chopra, Justin were the main attendings in the Aesthetic Surgery Fellowship of LA, right? That
Yep.
used to be
Yeah.
the Grant Stevens Fellowship that was called Marina Rocks, or the Marina Fellowship, right? So it's evolved. But that fellowship, we have fellows, and we have 2 great fellows, and Tyler is one of them.
Yeah.
Just a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago now, I guess. And yeah, we have those fellows as well, and we kind of they cross paths and are all about the same sites.
Do you think that you really enjoy the resident or the trainee interface? Do you think that that's something that like you're happy to have now in private practice? That's one question that I have for you. The second question is, do you feel that having that academic connection helps at all with building a practice or earning patient trust or getting those sorts of patients?
Yes, and no. I mean, I love having the residents and the fellows. They push me. They ask questions of things like, "Why do you do that?" And, sometimes you're like, "I don't know. Let me think about this." Right? So, because that's the way I was taught, kind of thing. And you think you don't do things the way you were taught and don't think about it, but sometimes I guess you do. And so it gets you thinking. Or they're like, "Why don't you do it this way?" I'm like, "I don't know." And so you start looking at things, or I saw this, or I read about this, or so it's always keeping you on your toes, which I think is amazing. And I really like that part. And I honestly don't think I would be where I'm at in my career if I didn't have the residents and fellows. They, like I said, push me. And then I have access to the cadaver lab, which when I started doing the crevasse technique and I was worried about the root, the nerve root. And when I started doing the
Yeah.
glands and I was worried about the gland, like I could go to a cadaver lab and then I could learn with the residents and the fellows, and we're all digging in there and trying to figure out the anatomy. Like it was amazing, and I wouldn't have done that if I was alone in my own little practice somewhere. So I definitely credit them to making me a better surgeon, and for keeping me honest. As far as getting patients, I don't think patients care if I'm faculty as all. I mean, think about it. They've got people who are not even plastic surgeons or ENTs
Yeah,
or
you're
anything.
right.
They're like cardiologists doing facelifts, or
Yeah.
you could be anyone who's got some decent before and afters and good on camera, and you could have an amazing facelift practice. So I don't think anyone cares, that the lay public, let's say. But what I would say is that I have developed a practice of health professionals, and a lot of them came from the USC connections. So
Interesting.
I operate on a lot of the people connected to the program that are in the healthcare industry, that are in the know. And that has sort of just kind of propagated. And so I take care of a lot of
That
doctors,
makes sense.
nurses, nurse anesthetists, and that kind of stuff. And it's funny because I even do the same thing. I'll go and ask the residents, like, hey, when my sister was sick, I was like, hey, in the Kaiser system, because my sister was a Kaiser member, which doctor should operate on my sister? And
Yeah.
they know, right? And they go,
Yeah.
they're in the middle of surgery. They know who to trust.
Yeah.
And then, obviously I ask some attendings that are there, but the residents are in the thick of it, and they see when they get when other staff at other facilities get a referral to come see me, they value it. So
Yeah.
it's
That's
been
not
helpful in that regard.
it's not the
Yeah.
first time I've heard that. I have a good buddy back home in Virginia who said that a lot of the residents who rotate with him, when they're rotating with other people, they'll kind of, mention his name and things like that because they respect what he does, and it's helped to build his practice. I don't take that lightly, and I think that's important for the audience to hear. And then in training the aesthetic fellows, like, what do you think makes a good fellow?
Not being annoying in the OR is number one.
Okay, so what does that mean? They can't talk.
That's number one. I'll give you a Tyler story, as a matter of fact.
Wait, so is he annoying?
One
No,
day
he
he
can't.
was, and we had to tell him to stop. So he would like to flash his headlight, his Ronin, in people's faces and go, LAPD. You can see him doing that,
He's
right?
hilarious.
Yeah, you can see
Yeah,
him
of
doing that,
course.
right?
Of course.
So, if he wouldn't have stopped doing that, he'd have been a terrible fellow. But when we told him to stop doing that, he stopped. So he became one of the
That's
amazing
so
ones.
funny.
So that's one example. But you want someone that is going to push the field forward. In our fellowship, we're looking for leaders. Jay, Ash, Ritu, and Justin and I are all trying to push forward and contribute to plastic surgery, aesthetic plastic surgery. And that's what we're looking for. Tyler wrote a nice paper on deep neck work, which is great. We need more of that kind of stuff. Dan Gould has written a lot and pushed the field forward as well. He wrote the paper with Ben Talé on the crevasse technique, which is fantastic. If you guys haven't read it, you guys should.
Yeah.
It's that kind of stuff and leadership within the society, doing things like this podcast, like you guys are doing, and just spreading the word about stuff is what we're looking for leaders.
Yeah. And, as someone who may apply into aesthetic fellowship one day, or for other residents that are listening that may, what should they look for in an aesthetic fellowship? Because there's a lot of them out there, but I'm sure they're not all one and the same.
Yeah, there's a lot of them out there, and they're all different, so that's great. I think some are a little more academic than others. Some are a little bit more private practice than others. Different people have different ideas of what they want, have to look for what fits you. The beauty about, I would say, ours would be that there isn't just one person. But for some people, they want just one person, right? So if someone wants that mentorship program and have that connection with that one person, and then the whole year, I kind of had that with Grant. It was great, but I didn't get a lot of exposure than Grant and Michelle Spring. With our current setup, we've got 5 of us plus others. I mean, there's a few others that are part of the fellowship. There's probably like 5 or 6 others. So they get a broad breadth of different practice styles, models, ways of doing things, which I think is very beneficial for the people coming through at least our fellowship. I think what to look for is whether they do the work you want to do. So we do a lot of face in our fellowship. I think that's a draw to our fellowship, and I think Meath's is as well. At DPSI, they do a decent amount as well. So I think that draws a lot of people to those. Rhinoplasty, I think, is a lot of things as far as face, not just facelifts, but rhinoplasty is things that people look for. I think autonomy is something to think about as well. Do they have a fellows clinic? Do you get to do a ton of cases? As a matter of fact, Vic, our current fellow, is presenting at ASAPS. Basically, some of our facelift results in our aesthetics clinic with the fellowship and how we sort of teach the D plane in the fellowship. And I was actually surprised to see the numbers of cases that were secondary. I knew they tackled some tough cases, but they tackled some really tough cases.
Yeah.
It was like 76% secondary facelifts.
Wow.
They don't get the chip shot. Only 25% of the cases they're doing primaries.
Wow.
They get some tough ones. Yeah, so look at the fellows clinic, what surgeries they do, what you want to do. If you want to be the best, you want to get trained by the best, right?
Yeah.
As Rod always says, right?
Yeah.
So, if you're looking at a certain thing, like for instance, everyone always talks about who trained who,
Yeah.
there's some value to that. I mean, you want to be good, it gives you a leg up. So look at their practices, look at their results, look at what they do, and see if that's something that you like and something that you want to sort of mimic as far as surgery. And then look at the region you want to be in, right? So if you want to be in New York, then maybe you're in New York. If you want to be in Texas, maybe you start there. And if you want to be on the West Coast, where it's nice and sunny, we've got a nice fellowship here. And a lot of the fellows tend to stay. Tyler was one of the few. Xiao Zhu didn't stay last year, and Hillary didn't stay last year. They both went to where they were from, but many of the fellows nowadays are staying. The 2 fellows that are here now are going to stay in LA.
So when considering fellowships, it sounds like most of the people that Hank and I have interviewed have said you should do a fellowship. in aesthetic surgery? I mean, for the most part, you should do a fellowship. But so I'm curious to hear what your take is on that. And then if the answer is yes, why do you think you should? Is it because of the mentorship network? Is it just to actually, is it more technical than that? What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, there's a little bias. We have a fellowship. We like to get good fellows, so I'm gonna lean towards yes. But there's also, there's an opportunity cost associated with it, and it isn't like your first year of practice opportunity cost. It's your last year of practice, right?
Yeah.
And that could be a significant amount of money. So there are some successful people out there that didn't do fellowships, that came through my residency program, and when I was part of the residency, and are doing great. Like Dan Barrett and Sheila Nazarian were residents at USC, and they're doing fantastic without having done fellowships. But I do think that the fellowship does lead to you being able to tackle more complex cases, feel more confident, and probably get you a leg up on doing those cases earlier. And then it's like everything, right? Like if the intern is not that great at suturing, and they're not that great by second year, by third year they're even worse, and they start falling behind because no one's letting them do anything because they're not that good, and you start falling
Yeah.
behind. And I kind of feel like that's what happens if you don't do a fellowship. Like, you don't get those cases at the beginning. You're not like sort of stretching your legs at the beginning, and then you're like, okay, well, I never got the facelift after the first 5 years of my practice. Maybe I'm not going to do them, or I'm not going to do rhinoplasty anymore, or I'm not going to do that because I didn't tackle that early in my career. And I have
Yeah.
some friends of mine who are now reaching out, and they're like, I didn't really do many faces all my career, and now I'm starting your age. They're my age now, and they're like, I'm starting to get some facelift consults. Can I come hang out with you, right? And like
And you're
they
like,
need to
no.
start like catching up, and
Yeah.
that's because they didn't do a fellowship and get that sort of reps in while they were a fellow. They went straight out of residency. So I do think that there is that value to it.
They
Yeah.
don't have the confidence per se to do those cases, especially I think a lot more residency programs are actually implementing aesthetics more into their residency curriculum. Obviously, you were saying USC does. I know at Penn we do, but there are a lot of programs that don't have that much exposure to aesthetics. And if they do, it's under more insurance based or not as much private practice exposure. So this way, you kind of can spread your wings a little bit and see how people are doing things in the private practice world, which is a
Yeah.
little bit different or a lot
That
different.
actually reminds me of a case I did at Penn. Joe Shaletti was the attending. It was a resident clinic case. It was a facelift, and Alex Gugatas was the chief who
Hmm.
was doing the facelift, who went on to do a micro fellowship, who then became a microsurgeon at the University of Washington, right,
Yes.
for a while,
Yeah.
and then did an aesthetic fellowship with Kia Sagi, and is now an aesthetic surgeon.
Crazy. One of my friends from general surgery residency, Charlie Galanis, do you know,
Oh
he
yeah,
also did,
Charlie's fantastic.
yeah, he did Hopkins surgery, UCLA, and then microsurgery. And then I don't think he's doing micro anymore.
No, he's doing some really nice high def lipo stuff.
Yeah.
He does nice work here in town.
So I have so many questions, but we're going to try to narrow this down so we can get to the end. But two quick questions related to everything we just talked about. Do you think are patients at all coming to plastic surgeons who are fellowship trained? Like, do you ever hear that come up in conversation? Oh, you're fellowship trained or you're board certified or anything like that. So that's question number one. Question number two is, how competitive is your fellowship? I'm sure it's competitive because I hear about it all the time from all of my friends who are interested in aesthetic surgery. But if you had to like rate it in terms of competitiveness, like how many applicants do you get? How many do you take? I'm sure you're getting phone calls from mentors about taking certain people. But anyways, those two questions.
Number one, not much. I don't think anyone sort of cares that I did a fellowship. They have a hard time differentiating facial plastic surgery
Yeah.
fellowships from aesthetic fellowships from cosmetic surgery, right? So
Yeah.
if you go to their
Yeah.
website, they make a compelling argument as to why they should be the cosmetic surgeon to go to over plastic surgeons, because they have a whole year dedicated a fellowship where they just do aesthetic surgery, and in plastic surgery they only spend a couple months, and they're mostly recon surgeons. And you start reading it and you're kind of like, okay, that kind of makes sense a little bit, and especially to the lay public, right? So they don't know the difference between a cosmetic fellowship and on any of these things. So yeah, I don't think people
Yeah.
care. Like I said, back to my, you could just have some okay results and great marketing, and you're going to be busy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of scary.
It is very scary. It is very, very
Yeah.
scary. And then what the second question was,
How competitive is your fellowship?
Oh yeah. Well, we get calls and those are very important, obviously. We want to have the best of the best. And so those calls do help, especially from trusted individuals that we know their word means something. But I mean, I probably wouldn't have matched today. It's
That's
kind
how
of
I feel.
crazy. We match our top one to our top two or three the last 4 years, and we usually only rank 6, 7, 8 because we know we're not going to go past three. I think we interview like 16 total, maybe. Many people come visit us for a week. Almost
That's what I was
everyone
going to
does.
ask.
Very few people come apply to us without coming for that week before. So we get a chance to get to know them. They get a chance to get to know us as well, which is very important because it's like it's dating, right? So they may not want to come to us. They may not like what they see when they come. It might not be a good fit because this is all about a fit. So that week is important. Now, not everyone spent a week who's matched with us. It doesn't mean it's a prerequisite. We have taken people that didn't, or we've interviewed them and really liked them and be like, hey, we liked you. You mind coming to see us afterwards? And they'll come and spend the week because we like them. But by and large, most people spend a week with us and hang out. And then we do a Zoom interview after that. And then, yeah, we submit our rank. And the last few years, we've done quite well.
So it sounds like, having people back you up is important. And then probably that face-to-face interaction clinically for that week or whatever. And then do you ever run into the issue where like you guys have such big names in your group that like one person's getting a call about this person and then you're getting a call about this person and then the third person's getting a call
Yeah.
about
We usually almost always all get called about someone when someone's that zealous about someone.
Yeah.
But sometimes they'll call just one of us and we'll share it to the whole group. So we do share it to everyone and but a lot of times like they'll call and they'll call us all just to make sure that we heard from them and make sure that their resident is getting heard and that they're a great resident.
Before we get into the last two questions, is there anything else that you think on an application that is important? For me, I remember when I was interviewing for microsurgery fellowships, like I was worried about in-service scores. Like, are people going to care about in-service scores? Are people, you know what I
No one
mean?
cares about in-service scores. We care some about research, but I think more than anything, we care about their ability to operate. So, when we get insight from others, we want to know about their hands. We want to know if they have ability, if their brain can do what their if their hands can do what their brain's asking.
Yeah.
And that is very important because we're trying to train technically excellent people. So in order to allow them to do things, we need them to be able to do those things. And we all know some that are very bright, but their hands just don't listen to their bright brain. And it's going to be tough in our fellowship because you'll be holding a lot of hook. And that doesn't make it very happy for too many people around when that
Yeah.
happens.
So is it a common, I keep wanting to go into, I promise you we have two last questions, but I have to ask another
It's okay.
question.
I got time. I
Yeah.
blocked off some time. You guys can chop this up and put it however you want.
This is how
I got
excited
time.
we were to
No.
speak to you.
It's funny. I feel like I'm going to jump ship. I did microsurgery. Now I want to do an
I
aesthetic
was-
fellowship.
Come on,
I was
man.
gonna-
Let's go.
Well, I was gonna say, so Dr.
My motion to
Roy,
kill me.
he's obviously one of my biggest mentors at Penn. He's a microsurgeon at Penn, so he can't disown me if I go aesthetic route.
Dude, are
Saeed.
you
Who
kidding
was
me?
this? You broke up
Saeed,
when you
right
said-
here.
But no,
Me.
Oh, he's your mentor?
Yeah.
One of my
Okay.
biggest. Yeah.
How can I hate you for doing that when I'm considering doing it right?
No, what's so funny is I couldn't get the job at USC because they were looking for a mid-career guy and they hired a really good guy. And well, before they hired that guy, it was like a year and they were still looking. They couldn't hire a mid-career guy. And Joe Carey called me up and goes, "Hey, you still interested in this job at USC?" I said, "Man, no, not anymore. You work 3 times as hard as I do and you make like less than I do. Like I'm not doing it. I tasted the good life. I can't go back to it, bro. I'm sorry. That's
Yeah.
it. I'm done." And I'm like, "You had me a year and a half ago when I wanted to do it, but like this is good. I'm liking what I'm doing now. I can't do it." And then they went on to hire a really great hire, Ketan Patel at
Yeah,
USC.
fantastic.
Yeah, and so I think they did a better hire not hiring me and getting Ketan for what they were looking for because I really started liking the aesthetic stuff and really wanted to push that. And they never developed that side of USC. So yeah, kind of worked out.
Yeah. That is led into another question, but I have to go back to asking my other question first. So the myths of aesthetic fellowship, I think of certain fellowships as, there's certain, for instance, craniofacial fellowships that are called museums because you just watch, you don't actually touch anything. Can you actually come to your fellowship and operate? Or is it,
Yeah,
you can?
absolutely. And that's, I think you're going to see that with the presentation with the fellows clinic. You're going to see how they're able to do those cases and they do them completely by themselves, because we have a stepwise method of teaching them how to do these surgeries. And so once they actually get to do, they're doing them and we encourage them to do them. So, there's a price point for which you can have surgery with me. And if that price point's a little too much for you, and you came from Instagram and you're not so sold on me, then for this lesser price, you can go to the fellow. And that's where the fellows
Nice.
get their cases.
That's
And the
That's
amazing.
awesome.
fellows, yeah, and the fellows do a fantastic job with it. And then it's out in the open. They're not having to when my patients see me, they're not thinking the fellow's doing the case. The fellows aren't doing the case. They paid top dollar to have me do the surgery. I'm doing the surgery. And they do watch there, but they learn a lot. And then during the case, the next case, or the next week that's theirs, then they get to do their own surgery. And a lot of times don't have to take them through them. Like I can think of the last time I actually had to pop my head in was last year. One of the fellows was doing a deep neck on a really big neck and got a little lost, couldn't find the gland. And I was in the other room. I walked out of the other room for a second, looked in, said, "It's over here." They found it. Then I didn't have to go back for the other side. They found it on the other side perfectly.
Yeah, that's cool.
And it's one of those necks that even I get lost in sometimes because it was a big neck and they did great. Most of the time I'm not having to especially towards the end of the year to have to do much hand holding or direction or anything, so which is really nice. The fellows really come out of here being able to operate. So as far as our fellowship, it's not a museum.
Yeah, that's great to hear, and I'm sure the audience would like to hear that. And then the
And
other
I'm sure
thing,
Tyler told you guys the same. So
yeah.
Yes.
We did a podcast with Tracy Pfeiffer, the president of
the
the
president.
Aesthetic Society.
Yeah.
And this is something that's interesting in microsurgery now because there's been a sort of a shift in this whole notion that microsurgery has to be done in academic centers, and there's almost an explosion of community private practice microsurgeons now. I think that part of it is that the reimbursement side, when you know what's coming in and you know what's going out in your own practice, is better. There's no doubt. It's perhaps fourfold. And you just talked about, tasting the good life and it being difficult to imagine life differently. Dr. Pfeiffer mentioned, now we're in a period where physician reimbursement continues to go down, and it does. And then you keep reading reports about hospitals profiting. Do you think that all of that perhaps might have an influence on people going more the private route than the academic route?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it will, but I think one of the problems is if you're reliant on reimbursement patterns, things can dry up, as we all know, right? So there might be a good reimbursement for something, and it might be selective in one state, and all of a sudden it dries up in that state. So being reliant on someone else's determination as what your value is tough, and that's why I like aesthetic surgery because I make a name for myself in the community, in social media, with my colleagues, and I can set my price and someone decides to pay it or not. And, it's a fair trade and I'm not worried about someone pulling the rug out from under me. I put in the work all these years on establishing myself as a known entity and I can name my price. It's a lot of work to get there. It's risky, but in the end, I have people looking for me and wanting to pay me a certain amount to do a service. And that's basically a funnel that I control that comes to me. And the market dictates how much I can get, I guess, but that's where a little bit of marketing and just providing a good service to patients and word of mouth comes in to keep that afloat. And if that funnel isn't controlled by you or the market isn't controlled by you at all, it's not controlled even by the market, it's controlled by some legislator or some insurance person, then you just might turn off one day.
Yeah.
All right, Hank.
Well, first of all, I just want to say this has been amazing. We went, over our time just because we're having such a good time, and I hope you had a great time too. We were so excited to have this episode, so thanks for joining us. But we do have these rapid, fun questions that we ask everybody at the end of the podcast. But I think more specifically for you, I want to add one extra on, which is just what was the most challenging aesthetic case that you can think of?
That one neck.
No, it wasn't that one neck. Most challenging aesthetic case I can think of.
Or that you were a part of, or what makes something such a difficult aesthetic case?
I mean, I've had one complication that was sort of difficult and not expected. I have a gustatory sweating from submandibular gland, which has only been reported once before. Our
Wow.
paper with Tyler wasn't even reported in that, and that was difficult because I didn't quite understand where it came from. There's a paper that came in the literature that they got one from doing intraoral resection of the submandibular gland and got gustatory sweating. So no
Wow.
transcutaneous incision, but yet they still got gustatory sweating. So there's some thought process that maybe tearing the ganglion causes the ganglion to sprout new nerves and then maybe gets to the muscle through the muscle, or it gets to the skin and makes gustatory sweating. So I may have pulled a little bit too much and pulled the gland a little too medial when I was trying to get the ligature around it or something, and caused the ganglion to tear off and caused the fibers to come out. The repair wasn't that hard, and it just went back in. I put some alloderm between, just basically opened up the skin and the platysma and put some alloderm between there. But she was difficult because she also had a parotid gland fullness here that I kind of took a little bit of parotid on, did a Bravo 0.5 on superficial parotidectomy because I didn't really want to do that much, but it was still prominent. So when I did that, I also did a Bravo type 1.5 and shaved off a portion of her parotid gland. And then, so I used the alloderm here, and here in order to make sure I didn't get that same gustatory sweating on both sides.
Yeah, cool. Interesting. Yeah.
So that was an interesting one, and it was hard. And she had a big neck. That's how we ended up there. But I'll be talking about that at the Aesthetic Society next week. That's talking about complications and how to make deep neck works more safe. So Tyler's paper, I'll be talking about this one complication. So you guys got a preview as to what can happen with necks. But it's just this weird, like, how do you get gustatory sweating from here? You know, Frey syndrome we hear about all the time here. We think it's a direct connection to the skin because there's not, like, you know, some coverage or what have you, but there's more to it apparently.
Yeah. The next question is, what kind of music do you listen to in the OR?
So Tyler can attest to this. I have probably one of the best sound systems in the operating room. In any operating room, we have a big subwoofer. I like things with bass. That's why there's a big subwoofer. Bad Bunny has been probably number one on the list. So it's Pitbull's Globalization on a Sirius XM, which plays a decent amount of Bad Bunny, or it'll be like a Bad Bunny mix with some of that. That's been heavy recently.
Oh, that's
probably
cool.
the last 3-4 years.
That's great. And then last question, what's your favorite surgical instrument?
My favorite surgical instrument is probably the Viterbo right now. So the Viterbo is a instrument that is like a Trepsat. The Trepsat's that little platypus thing that opens up so you can open up tissues.
Yep.
Yeah.
Viterbo is similar, but instead of having to open it like a scissor, you squeeze it like a Takahashi. So you squeeze it and it opens the Takahashi is one of my favorite too, just because I like saying Takahashi. But you squeeze it and two platypuses open, so you can just squeeze and open up those tissues. So I'll use the Viterbo to open up over the deep to the platysma here and the parotid mesenteric fascia, and then I'll use it when I'm around the gland. Once you make opening in the fascia of the gland, that's a loose areolar tissue where the gland just kind of opens up. So a lot of times I'll just use the Viterbo there. Some people use a peanut, but the Viterbo you can just spread around and it opens up quite quickly.
I have to say that's the first time we've gotten that as a favorite instrument. I love when we get a new one. Usually everybody says the McCabe.
Yeah, the McCabe's cool, but you know, I know why you say the McCabe because you're from there. I used to like the McCabe a lot.
Well, thank you so much for joining us tonight. This was really awesome.
Thank you for listening to The DIEP End, a plastic surgery podcast. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, please like, subscribe, and leave a rating on Apple Music or Spotify. Video from the podcast is available on Instagram and YouTube at The DIEP End Podcast. Join us again soon for more conversations with luminaries and experts in the world of surgery.